Good morning. All right, so let's get to our guest, Jackie Peterson. And Jackie has a really guest called The Outer Known. And I believe I got that title right. Hi.
Hi. Kind of sideways there.
Yeah, I
Feeling a
like
little
it.
sideways today.
Yeah, it was a little like the Poseidon Adventure. It's an old film where a ship turns upside down. Anyway, good to see you.
Yeah, you
Anything,
too.
anything recently that has surprised you?
Um, I guess the whole sort of re-entry into the world has surprised me. I guess my reaction to it.
Yeah,
Um, I was sort of riddled with anxiety, like most folks, for the
mm-hmm.
duration of the pandemic, and I've been slowly, reintegrating and trying to go out in the world and
Mm-hmm.
um, I'm not freaking out.
Oh,
So far,
good.
it's been going really well. I've seen a couple of friends. I've eaten at a restaurant.
Wow.
I've gone to a comedy club.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
That's great.
big steps. I certainly had some moments of like, ugh, is this okay? Does this feel good? Is this safe? Like, should I be doing this?
Right.
Um, but overall, I'm feeling good. I'm
Yeah.
feeling like less, hesitant, like not kind of freaking out, not super anxious. Yeah.
Good. That's great. I go back and forth, I
Hmm.
sometimes I find myself like wearing a mask until I see that the
Yeah.
times like Los Angeles, there's a more of a strict mask wearing that seems to be going on here. So
Right.
it's different every state.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Same.
Yeah.
Same.
Oh, I remember something I was surprised by. There used to be a place in Pee-wee's Big Adventure. Do you remember this film,
Hmm.
Pee-wee's Big Adventure?
Oh yeah.
There was he goes to a diner. It's like a truck stop, and there's the
Yes.
giant dinosaurs.
Yes.
We stopped by there from Tucson to LA and
Oh, how
thought
fun.
we'd see it, and it's gone. So they moved. I don't know how do
No.
you move those dinosaurs. Is what my question is. How do you?
Yeah. That's
So
wild.
that was kind of a surprise. Yeah. All
Yeah.
right. Well, Outer Known Pod is watching us. So let's talk. We can talk a little bit about that because I think that's
Good
really,
times.
yeah. um, and were you interested? So, could you tell people a little bit about the Outer Known podcast?
Yeah. Well, I mean, should we tell people how we actually know each other?
Oh, you and I? I like to keep things a mystery. We
Okay,
worked.
that's fine. We don't have to say.
No, no, I'm just joking.
We have a
Um,
we have a telekinetic, telepathic connection. That's how
that's
it works.
right. That's right. We we only know each other from Zoom working with
Not true. I met you at AAM in New Orleans. Remember we were watching Game of Thrones at our little group rental house?
Oh my God, that's right.
Yeah,
Jackie, why
yeah.
didn't I just didn't put that together.
That was me.
Now I remember you. Yeah, I remember where you were sitting. You were
Mm-hmm.
into Game of Thrones.
Very.
And I was getting into it too. I think I was just starting maybe.
Yeah,
I can't remember. Yeah.
yeah. It was
Yeah.
the season finale, I think.
That's so funny. I forgot. That's a nice surprise. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so Ryan and I are museum folks,
Mm-hmm.
currently working together with the Empathetic Museum.
Mm-hmm. And we kind of try to help museums be better.
Yes,
Be
yes.
best.
In two words, yes,
Be best. We try to
yes,
get.
yeah. In the words of our
Ugh,
former first lady.
oh, no. Yeah. So no, and yeah, and it's been really meaningful, great work for me, and it's been great working with you too. And
Thanks.
yeah. So I had no idea that you had done this podcast and you were interested in kind of things from the outer known. And
Yeah,
I'm
yes.
curious. I'm curious where this name outer known. What does it mean to you? The outer
Um,
known.
yeah. So the podcast was sort of a kind of initially was like a bit of a joke. So I'm actually wearing the shirt. I don't know how much folks can see it.
Yeah, they can. Yeah, yeah.
But so this guy here in the wig and the sunglasses, he is a rap artist named Open Mike Eagle, and this other person here in the poofy and the glasses, that's
Uh huh.
uh, his buddy Video Dave, and at the top of the pandemic, he and Video Dave were actually out on tour, and they had to cut their tour short, obviously because of the pandemic, and they both sort of ended up back in LA, and as most of us were back in March, like not knowing what the heck was going to happen next, and just not really having much to do, he started doing these Instagram lives as this kind of radio DJ personality, and he called it Quarantine Drive Time Radio. And so he developed this kind of following in the Instagram live chats, and the chats were like lit, like they were so great, and all of us kind of started connecting. There was just this really good synergy, this really good energy, and we all started connecting more like offline. And so my podcast co-host, Lane Collins, is one of the QDTR folks who I met there. And on like one of the random Instagram lives, Mike was like, I think Lane and Jackie should do a podcast. I would listen to that. And we were like, but what if we really did? So we kind of called their bluff, and we started this podcast together, and it's called The Outer Known. So my co-host she's a witch. She's into like metaphysics. I mean, I am not a witch, but I'm also into those things. And so we kind of thought, like, let's do this podcast. And The Outer Known we kind of came up with that name because, our podcast tagline is a podcast that shines a light on the outer edges of inner knowing. So kind of these like what people standardly consider sort of like outsider belief systems, subjects that aren't necessarily mainstream, but we are really interested in exploring them and talking to people who practice and study these various beliefs and practices. And so it's been a really fun, it's kind of an interview-based podcast. But our goal is really to kind of, we like to joke amongst ourselves that we're like the anti-goop, right? Like it's a very intentional podcast that creates a space that is really uplifting, a very wide swath of diverse voices, and kind of not this like spiritual industrial complex type thing. Like
you said anti-goop?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know.
That's
Folks
like a good
with
descriptive. Goop. Yeah, someone's just sent me their sunblock, called Super Goop.
Well, is it goop or super goop? Because they're different things.
Super Goop isn't goop?
No,
it's not the Gwyneth Paltrow goop.
We like Super Goop.
Okay, I thought Super Goop is pretty good. Yeah, but anyway, they're not sponsoring us, so we can't talk.
No, Goop is like Gwyneth Paltrow's like pseudoscience kind of brand.
I think at one time someone gave me Gwyneth Paltrow's cookbook, and there were photographs of her like in pastures or with her children or holding baskets of produce. So I used to on my Instagram, hey Paula, on my Instagram I would just photograph those images and pretend like that we ran into each other while we were in a pasture. She and I talked about the produce at the neighbor market.
That's amazing.
And that was fun but the problem was people probably knew because it was better photography than what was actually on my Instagram. So it was kind of obvious that I all of a sudden didn't have like great lighting and filters and stuff.
A professional photographer, for example. Yeah.
But I love anti-goop. I love that.
Yeah.
Would you like to doodle?
Yes.
All right. So folks who are joining us now, just letting you know, you always can doodle with us. Pen, marker, paper, and what we'll do is we'll turn our cameras and just continue our conversation. So, all right. And this is never a graceful profession.
Exactly. This is going to be really awkward, so bear with me.
I like the awkwardness. Although you guys have a very nice podcast in terms of very professional. So.
All right. So let's see. Trying to adjust the angle here. I liked your doodle last week, Ryan. That was really fun.
I can't. Oh, with Greg Greaves?
Yeah.
Very interesting. Yeah, he is Greg Greaves, and actually he made me think a little bit about he was talking about gaming and spirituality, I believe, and it did get into. Okay,
Still having
I think yeah,
difficulties. Bear with me.
that's okay. That's okay.
I'll get there. I promise.
Yeah, yeah. No, this was a lot quicker for me. I like ran in and started this 10 minutes before 6 o'clock, thinking like, oh my God, how am I going to be able to do it? But sometimes when you're just kind of
Well, you've done this before.
running off the street. Yeah, that's true.
This is actually my first rodeo.
That's right. Yeah, with most people, I think I've introduced them to the whole drawing on camera thing. So yeah.
Okay, I think I see some paper. See
Yeah,
my colored pencils.
I like it.
I think we're
Those
good.
are nice. All right, so someone said draw a lasso. So I've got a nice beefy shadow here, but yeah. So where were we? Yeah, so we were talking about Greg Grieve, and Greg Grieve is, he religious studies in North Carolina, University of North Carolina, and thinking a lot about virtual reality and then kind of like spirituality and religion and how kind of those things work together. But it did get really into like the ideas of good and evil and video gaming, which I think, and then for me, I started making connections between kind of the world of video games and the world of conspiracy theories, because there's the same kinds of like trying to connect mysterious clues and figure out kind of unsaid rules, and I don't know, it just seemed to make sense to me. So, and as a historian, because you also are a historian besides the podcast, I wonder if you come across any ideas of like what you're noticing in terms of like either historical trends or even the interest in the occult is seems to be go in and out of kind of people take it seriously in and out of history. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think at least from my perspective, given that we are kind of went through this collective moment of global crisis and global trauma,
right?
I think that's situations like that are generally kind of what spark people's interest, because things are happening that aren't really easily explained, and people are kind of trying to make sense of what's going on in the world.
Yeah.
And so I think people always look to religion and spirituality and different things when they're experiencing crisis or trauma.
Yeah. And I think meaning too. I feel like people during the pandemic, a lot of people were like, well, my job used to be meaningful to me and I used to be like grinding at it. And now that grinding doesn't make sense because of our new situation. And I know that I've heard that a lot of people, quit their jobs or have a change of like where they're living or the kinds of things they want to do, And I think that, again, a crisis of whether it's identity or of meaning is something that I've certainly popped up for me, where it's like, wow, I got to figure out, it was like, for me, it's like, I got to figure out what makes sense to me now. Or what I'm going to spend my time, what I'm going to spend my time watching on television. That's really worth my time.
No, that's funny, but yeah, I definitely have had some really interesting conversations with people about I don't know, what do I really want to live in this place anymore? What kind of value is it giving me?
Yeah, my partner and I had fantasies. At one point, we're like, well,
there's not, we're getting older. There's not any health care here. So it's
Mm,
like, you know, what are we going to do because of the, we're artists and we're trying to
right.
figure out how do we survive. And so we're like, oh, had the fantasy, well, we'll move to Scotland, So we, so we thought about Scotland, and we started listening to Scottish news radio in the morning.
Fascinating.
It was fascinating, and it was interesting to hear how they were dealing with the pandemic and how kind of like warm and to use the word
Mm,
empathetic. There was
yeah.
a real sense of explaining it to teenagers what they were going through. This would
Hmm.
be was this the prime minister? Well, it's not the prime minister, but it was like a politician actually
Okay.
addressing teens and what they were going to be going through
Mm,
during the pandemic, and understanding how hard it was for them to wear a mask and change their behavior and how they want to be out doing things. And it was like, wow, this is a really different approach,
yeah. Yeah,
Um,
it's funny you mentioned that. There was at the top of the pandemic, my spouse and I had, well, technically he discovered it, but there was this, I don't know if he was English or Scottish, but he had this kind of YouTube sort of check-in that he would do, and he was really funny, but also very like empathetic, very sympathetic, very
hmm
like trying to be very clear,
hmm
talking about things in very easily understandable terms.
hmm
And it was just delightful to watch. But yeah, the way that, he was critical, obviously, of the way that his own country was handling things, but also like, trying to be real with people and try to, be factual and,
hmm
um, help people try to really get their heads around what was happening because, everyone, myself included, was just like, what the heck is this?
And it's kind of like, we go to the news and we want information, but it may have not been information that we were really wanting. I mean, we may have wanted just to
Mm,
hear from people that were concerned and thinking about it and trying to understand it. I mean, sometimes that can be information that's helpful enough,
sure.
and understand it in, like more survival and like, I'm losing my words here. This happens sometimes when I'm doodling. I actually language language kind of gets thrown to the side. But
Words.
speaking of that, I mean, the thing about Scottish radio, which was challenging, was just understanding what people were saying, because
Yeah.
there was definitely slang and accents that were like, sometimes it'd be
Hmm.
like, if I tuned it out for a second, like, I have no idea what people are talking about, but it's really musical.
Hmm. Hmm.
So anyway, it was more of a fantasy that I think kept us going a little bit.
Sure. Have
Um,
you ever been to Scotland?
no, of course not. I mean,
Just out of curiosity.
yeah, kid has definitely been there and performs there and stuff. But
Okay.
for me, it was kind of like, I have some friends who live in the States who were from Scotland, who I just thought were,
Mm.
seemed really nice, and I don't know. It was a fantasy, yeah,
I
fantasy.
mean, I fantasize about living somewhere with universal health care every day.
Yeah. Oh no, me too. Me too. Me too. I just can't imagine that America is not going to go through an extreme poverty cycle where this is just. I mean, I think we found. We've discovered it enough. Like
Yeah.
just from the pandemic, like how important you know uh, organized and concerted efforts are for everyone
Hmm.
to be healthy. So yeah. It's been quite a year. I mean, I guess there's a part of me that feels like I need to process what's happened, and then there's a part of me
Yeah.
that I know people would rather just like move on and not think about it. So I go back and forth.
Hmm.
But
Well,
it's hard.
that's the nature of trauma, right? Like,
Mm,
you know, you're sort of torn between like just wanting to get, get back to sort of something familiar and comfortable and quote normal.
hmm
Um, but also, wanting to understand what the heck just happened to you.
Right. And the other thing too is sometimes it was helpful for me to remember just in terms of history, like this has happened before. People have gone through
Yes.
this before. These kinds of things form culture. They change behavior. They
Mm-hmm.
change the way society is. So we are really part of that, a process of that happening, you know. And yeah, I mean, it's been really something. But then again, I remember, I remember going through this sometimes during the Bush administration and the Reagan administration.
Yeah.
But the intensity felt really intense because
Mm,
it affected my, like, my body in just
right.
in a way that was, yeah. But other people probably have experienced it on a body level for hundreds of years. So
Mm-hmm.
I think so. I kind of try to think about that too. But yeah, I think what else?
Yeah,
Oh,
it's interesting kind of thinking about, the history that you pointed out, like, you know, some things do feel new, but a lot of it isn't. And, I think as a public historian, just thinking about, oh yeah, like people have been through this before, and this is not
hmm.
um is everything that we've experienced in the last 4 or 5 years even is not a new phenomenon. It feels
Mm-hmm.
new, but there's a roadmap, and I think if we as a society kind of could sort of be less um, sort of about instant gratification and immediacy and everything being now, and kind of took the opportunity to like sit for a minute and be like, hey, you know what, we have experienced this before, like we have done this before, and like what can we learn, what can we
Mm.
discover, what worked for this situation and what didn't, and you know
And it helps you keep you from getting too reactive, because
yeah,
you have a base knowledge of history you can go back to, and I know that no one likes to hear someone say, well, it's all happened before, so what you're going through now is not new. I mean, I couldn't say that to the community college students I was teaching who were going
right,
to school for the first time and away
right,
from their families, and I'm saying like,
sure,
well, I don't feel too bad for you because of what you're going through. Other people have gone through it. I couldn't say that because it was very real and for
yeah,
them, and it is very real, But at the same
totally.
time, I mean, like you said, as I've gotten more interested in history, I start to go, wow, we've all survived things, Well, people
Yeah,
people survive, and they actually are able to find joy now and then, even in really
right,
tough situations,
right.
and that, you know, that's that's a helpful thing. So
Mm. Yeah, and
yeah.
and just to be clear, like I didn't mean that in a sort of
Oh no, yeah,
use this to dismiss people's
no,
very real experiences, but more as you know, I think it's comforting,
yeah, completely.
and it sort of, I don't know what I'm saying anymore.
No, no, I get it. I get it. No, you're falling into the drawing too. I get it. After a while, you're like,
Yeah,
okay, yeah. It's a little hypnotic sometimes to doodle
no, it totally is. I
and
haven't I
talk at
haven't
this.
I haven't done anything like this in a really long time, so I'm enjoying it. It's like I'm
Oh,
making my own coloring book.
oh, good. Oh, well, that's kind of the key to my art.
I
I
noticed.
love. Yeah, like I do a lot of, and this is something as an artist I try to break because I do a lot of like drawing first and then kind of
Hmm.
going into kind of using color, and so sometimes I need to break that. But as doodling goes, yeah, it's really fun. Yeah. And I also find that since I started to doodle, it's changed the way I think about making art, and it helps me not be so precious about it, you know.
Mm.
And it's also made me think a little bit. Oh, my camera seems to be shifting a little. And it also seems to make me uh, think about labor in drawings and
Huh.
labor in art, because sometimes I think labor, the more artist labors on something, the more that people seem to think that it's accomplished. and
Yeah.
and so but that's I think that might be a cultural thing where sometimes simplicity is not, or casualness is not also celebrated. So doodling has been really good for me in terms of just going like saying, there's something about things that are simple, or something about things that are casual, or that anyone can do, that can be just as valid as a piece of art that
Mm,
took a long time to make. And so
totally.
because a lot of times it's not really the artwork itself, it's more the person's sensibility, and we all have a sensibility. That's kind
Right.
of, sorry, I don't mean to get teacherly, but it is something that I've gotten more excited about as I've done the show. Is there something that kind of, as you've done the outer known, that's changed for you, or you've discovered or got excited about from the podcast?
Yeah. I would say that it's been very validating.
Mm-hmm.
In a way that I didn't expect. And I find myself really and a lot of the conversations have that we've had struck a very deep chord within me that I'm still kind of
Mm-hmm.
ruminating on and thinking about. And I would say one of the specific things that has really changed for me is really understanding um, what it means to follow your intuition, and
Mm-hmm.
getting in better touch with that. And I've had some real world examples where I either didn't follow my intuition, and there were consequences to that, and I did follow my intuition, and there were also consequences to that, but in a very different way. So learning to sort of navigate that has been a really interesting um, experiment, if you will.
Yeah, completely.
um, but
And
I so much appreciate the people that we talked to this first season, um, sort of giving, I don't know, helping me feel more empowered in that, and living into that more.
mm-hmm. And also too, I mean, for intuition to work, you kind of have to trust it,
Yes.
And it's like I've spent a lot of time being scared of things that might be intuitive for me,
Mm,
um, and not trusting it. And then it's kind of like, but I remember when I was a kid, I would trust it, no problem. But it was like,
right.
as I got older, I feel like I may have learned to not trust it as much.
Yep.
That somehow being logical was something that was a sign of being a grown up, or
Hmm.
something. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it happens to all of us.
Mm.
There's something about the, I don't know, unencumberedness of children, and children's capacity to imagine things and see things with this very flexible and open mind, that the older we get, we kind of lose that um, because of, socialization, all
Hmm.
the various isms in the world. Um,
I guess I'm curious, as a historian, how do you create an intuitive history? Like, I mean, can those things be joined? Because usually I think of history as being kind of that it has to be well cited and researched,
mm,
and those are things I appreciate and value. But
sure.
I'm wondering if there is an intuitive process to history that doesn't get talked about, like when you're learning about it in like a university, or you know what I'm saying? You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. I think it's certainly, I've come up against this where you sort of read about something that's presented to you, or learn about something that's presented to you as a quote, doing air quotes here, a
Mm-hmm.
fact, but your lived experience tells you something different, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think there's, weighing where the sort of intuitive part comes in is, weighing your lived experience against what's being presented to you as fact. If that
Mm-hmm.
makes sense. And I think, I've seen this play out in, to kind of talk about the museum field in the, a so-called expert in indigenous art, for example, saying something about an art piece or an artifact, and an indigenous person, because they have a certain embodied knowledge and a lived experience, will tell you, like, well, that's not correct, because that's not what my culture and my embodied knowledge and what my lived experience tells me about
Mm-hmm.
this thing. And so I think what would be interesting and would, for me, be a really wonderful place to arrive is getting people to recognize that nuance and be willing to engage with it.
Mm-hmm.
Because neither thing is right or better than the other per se. And I think there is room for both.
Right, right. Because in some ways what ends up happening is that the history starts to be written for the field of history and not really for the subject. Like it becomes the history starts to just be more about like the structure of how people explain culture as opposed to really the cultural experience, if that makes sense. Intellectualized, I guess. Maybe I'm trying to say that. I don't. Hmm. Okay, well, I tried with that one. I don't know.
No,
I don't know if
you
that
broke
came
up a little
across.
bit, so I missed
Oh,
a little
okay.
bit of it. But.
Oh, all right. Yeah, basically what I was saying was just it goes beyond an intellectual understanding of history, and it goes beyond kind of like what history that historians always do, and it opens it up to maybe like more lived history,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
or or the subjectivity that's part of it.
Yeah.
Because I always think about like how people are not just formed by their. It's like I'm not just formed by my genetics. I'm not
Yes.
just formed um, by my personality and who I grew up with, but I'm informed by my culture and the historical moment and the country I'm
Yep.
living in, and all
Exactly.
these all these intersections of what we know to this point. And those are in
Right.
some ways both. I have to find a freedom in it, but I also am limited by it in terms of what I can know about myself or what I can know about the world. So there's like a
Sure.
part of me that loves the intuitive because it's like gaining knowledge outside of those systems that I
Mm.
usually use to make sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I guess that's the best I can explain it, but I'm still trying to figure it out. Yeah.
No, that makes total sense. So yeah, I think, I say this a lot, but I often feel like, I don't know that we maybe ever had it, but I think our society has generally lost if we ever had it, the capacity to hold nuance and to hold multiple truths,
Mm-hmm.
and to sort of have discussions and understandings about the world that, you know embrace multitudes, right? Like, I think we tend to think of science and history as being, quote, hard facts. But the reality is, like, science changes when there's new information,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, history changes when there's new information.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I think, trying to get back to that
Mm-hmm.
and trying to help people and give people the tools to understand that, you know, science and history is a reflection of the information that people had, the best information that people had at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I use the word best very loosely,
Mm-hmm.
because maybe that wasn't good information. And I think it's fine to, we need to become better at admitting when we are wrong and admitting when we were operating with bad information or incomplete information.
I would say that we're at a time now, at least for me, where institutions are definitely being challenged to either to reinvent themselves with a change in mind, or to just die out. So
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I'm surrounded by people who want to see change happen, and then people who are trying very hard to hold on to things. And a history
Yeah.
probably is a balance of both, maybe. I mean, as a non-historian, that's kind of, I just hope that the stuff that people hold on to is the good stuff that benefits people.
Well,
I don't
some of
know.
it is, some of it isn't. I think,
Yeah.
people are, I like the word that you used, which is precious, right? Like, people are very precious with the stories that they've been told, and
Mm,
um, people
yeah.
sort of have a hard time letting go, or again, like admitting when there is new information, and our understanding of something is different.
Yeah. Yeah. We're coming to the end here.
Really? That
Yeah.
was so fast.
It goes by really
Oh my
fast
goodness.
because we're multitasking.
We
So we
are.
I really appreciate your time though, and I appreciate you just drawing with
Same.
me and talking and about this stuff. I hope folks out in the studio audience continue to draw and until they want to. But I like to keep this to half an hour, and so I'm gonna have us sign off.
All
So
right, Ryan.
yeah, and let me get
Well,
my. Oh, it looks like a. All right.
back.
I'm
You're
flipping
flipping back.
back to my face. Yeah.
All right, here we go.
All right. Well, thanks. Yeah,
Yeah,
we'll
thank
have to
you. This
just
was really
continue our
fun.
conversation. I always love the sense of being able to we're going to have to pick up where we left off at some point, and,
Yeah.
yeah. Well,
Well,
thank you. And
thanks for inviting me.
sure, sure. And for those who may have just joined, this is called Doodle with me. We meet every Friday night at 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time and 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And please come when you want to. It's super just like drawing and chatting. And I always have amazing people like Jackie. So,
Oh, thank you.
all right.
And if
Well,
you're interested in,
yes.
alternative spirituality, all kinds of good stuff, definitely check out the Outer Known. We're on a bit of a hiatus for the summer while we plan out season 2, but there's 9 juicy episodes for you all to listen to in the meantime. So Outer Known Pod on Instagram, outerknownpod.com is our website. We're on all the various platforms. So
Yeah, thank you, Jackie. I missed I missed that. But yeah, I will definitely post a link to Outer Known podcast.
thank you.
I've really enjoyed them, and they're really fun. And you do something that's so cool, which is you summarize right at the beginning a little bit of what's gone on in
Mm-hmm.
your conversation, and I love that. That is the coolest. So you kind of know what you're getting into every time you listen to a podcast. So
Yep.
that's great. All right, well,
Yay.
take care. Mwah. So
Bye.
fun, and
Yes.
everyone have a great weekend and a great next week, and I'll see you when we can.
See you
Okay.
next Friday.
Bye.
Bye.